season would be spring, summer, fall or autumn, and winter, right? So this is the beginning of spring. This is Aries. This is the first um, sign in spring, Aries. By the time you get to the succeeding energy or house, the second house, you are well in spring, which is Taurus, which is a fixed sign, right? By the time you get to your third house, which is Gemini, it is mutable. Why? Because we are getting ready to change the season. We're going from spring to summer. Okay, so you have the mutable sign of Gemini that rules over the third house. Okay, so that's just kind of how that goes. So the angular houses represent the beginning of the phases of the human experience: the individual or personal, the familial or tribal, the social or public, and the universal or cosmopolitan. So there's the different ways that you can look at those different quadrants and how to remember which house is which. Okay, so the angular houses, like I said, they correspond to the cardinal signs. Okay, your cardinal signs indicating new beginnings, the new beginning of the new cycle, symbolizing the start of the season. And the angular houses are the fixed signs. They're said to be your most important houses because they are, they're not the fixed, but the angular houses, which are the cardinal signs. These are said to be the most important because planets in these houses, right, they have the most apparent activity and they tend to dominate the direction of your life. So that's a means of being able to understand and interpret that. So when you're looking at the first and seventh house is the first pair. So they come in pairs. They oppose each other. So the first and seventh house, the first house describes me and my relationship to myself. Now the seventh house describes you and my relationship to you. This speaks about what I am seeking to complete in myself, by having a relationship with you, which is i.e. other people. So as most people seek self-fulfillment through their relationships, the nature of this interchange is revealed by the particulars of this ascendant and descendant axis. So yes, this is the ascendant, which is your rising on the horizon, right? And this is the descendant, okay, which is the opposing side. Okay, now the 4th and 10th house is your second pair. They are opposing each other. Okay, so this reveals much about one's psychological foundation and their family background. So the 10th house speaks about what a person is set to accomplish in the world. Okay, so if we look at it, right, it resembles like a family tree. So this is your roots. The 4 is your roots, and the 10 is how high you can go, if we were to look at it that way. Right, so this is like the fruits from the 4th house. So when you have negative or malevolent or maleficent aspects here, maybe, or more negative aspects, maybe, if you got a Chiron here or something like that, this is going to weigh heavily into your 10th house and what you do with your career, what you decide to do with your life in the public. So this is very much correlated. So how a person does in their family can kind of give insight into how they deal in the public. So in the secedent houses, or secedent or secedent, so these follow the angular houses, as we know, right? So values are defined, realized, transformed, or adapted to the resources necessary for our growth in each particular quadrant. So the secondant houses correspond to the fixed signs, right? And they represent the midpoints of the quadrant. So these are the signs that anchor the energy. That's why they are fixed signs, because they anchor in that energy of the season or of the quadrant. All right, so they anchor the energy of the primary divisions of the year. So Taurus, second house, house of spring, right? Leo, 5th house, talking about summer. Scorpio, 8th house, this is fall. And the Aquarius, 11th house, this is winter. So the fixed sign focus strengthen, and define the nature of each of the 4 seasons. So it's defined, the season is defined here. So this is where refinery happens. So the second houses anchor the nature of each of the 4 quadrants. So they develop the essential nature of the angular positions, adding definition and values to our sense of self. So this refines you a little bit. This gets a little bit more to the core of the quadrant when we're talking about the second houses, okay? So when we look at the pairs, well, before we look at the pairs, let me say this. The second houses, these are the storehouses of your chart. So they hold our treasures. So the bank account, right? Or the safety deposit box. This is where we go to store what we value or to withdraw our valuables when we have need for them. So planets in these houses tend to either augment or deny support or sabotage what we value in ourselves, depending on what's placed there, depending on the planets, depending on the aspects of those planets, right? This is it. Like I said, it's whether we support or sabotage what we value in ourselves, what we value in others, and in general. So depending on your chart, these houses have the ability to sustain or inhibit our urges for self-development and personal achievements. So when we look at the pairs, you look at the second house and the 8th house. Both of these houses is talking about money. Well, you know, we can simplify them to talk about money, right? So the second house is what I value, what I hold dear to me, right? This is my personal possessions, values. These are my goods. So it's ruled by Taurus. We know Taurus, we say Taurus is a money sign. Taurus know how to get money, right? Okay, so it preserves and gives physical form to my sense of self. So it's opposite the house of death. And it's also opposite other people's money. So it speaks of destruction of form, but only as a vehicle of transformation so that more refined forms may evolve. So as the second house, and from the 7th to the 8th house, is also as much about other people's resources and values, because we're going from a partner's house into shared resources. So that's why after the 7th house, in the 8th house, you deal with death, you deal with other people's money, you deal with debts, you also deal with inheritance, because these are things, it has to do with things of value that has to do with other people that we still can have a connection to. But in the second house in itself, so see the opposing, see how it's dealing with self and see how it's dealing with the world. So the second house is like my money. This is how we can find how I make my money here, or the best way for me to make my money here, or if something is transiting here, if a situation comes up and it might take all of my money, we can see that in the second house. But when we get to talking about taxes, when we get to talking about debt, when we get to talking about inheritance, you know, things of that nature, that's the 8th house. So that's how we can tell that. All right.